morning. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. And I'm talking today. I'm not spinning music. And Harry is back. Yay! Welcome to Lovebabz, Lovetalk. I'm Babz Rawls. You know, if it's around 9 o'clock, I'm on. So today in studio with me is my soror and good friend, Dr. Maysa Akbar from Intergrated Wellness.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm blessed.
Celebrate good times. Come on. So 10 years.
10 years.
We were talking about this before we got on air. So you not starting out. You are in this game now.
In the game. I've been in the game.
You in the game,
yeah.
And you've got a decade under your belt, and you're celebrating Wednesday.
I'm celebrating on Friday. Friday. Yes.
I got Wednesday in my head.
On October the 12th. At the New Haven Lawn Club.
Mm-hmm.
We are having a gala celebration starting 6 p.m. is the VIP. 7 p.m. starts the dinner celebration and honoring some awardees that we're going to have there. I'm just super excited about the whole
It's a big
event.
deal. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a sister that has a business, but not any old kind of business. I mean, you are providing a service to a community and a population of people that often gets overlooked.
Yeah.
And that's real.
Yeah.
I mean, young children to adults, Black folks, people of color.
Yep. That's it's interesting having a business model that is specifically focused on delivering services for our population.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in the beginning when I was kind of creating this idea, people were like, you're crazy. You're going to pigeonhole yourself into just serving.
And you know what? People say that all the time when we start businesses, as if somehow or other, everybody else starts business for their population, but we get beat up about it.
Oh, yeah. Do you know how many people were like, that's not going to work? You know, why would you leave your good paying job? At the time, I had an appointment at Yale. I was also working at another community mental health center here in town. I was consulting. I mean, I was doing well. I was making more money then than I'm making now and work less hours. And, but when you have a passion for starting something that seems bigger than you, that in your heart that you're planting a seed in a community that needs it.
You sound like Roberta Hosky.
I just feel, and that's my girl.
And you sound like Eric Clemens. I mean, all the people who are doing this kind of soul work, like, it's not just about money. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, you would be, this is something that I'll share with you. I'm not the highest paid person in the business that I own. And sometimes those are the sacrifices that you have to make, because you have to look at the bigger picture, and you have to make sure that everything is aligned. It's a constant daily algorithm that you have to reset every day, making sure that, you're taking care of your staff, making sure that, you're meeting payroll, making sure that you have enough contracts coming in, that you're, making sure that you're still taking care of the patients and that you're being compassionate about the work that you do. Making sure that, you're forward in your thinking and you're innovating all the time, because if not, you're going to become obsolete. Making sure that you can be as competitive as anybody else. Making sure that every day, you're covering all your bases, because if there's a seam that's open, somebody's going to find it.
Yes.
And they're going to come for you.
That's real. They're going to come for you.
They're going to come for
and
you.
there are bigger outfits out there that say, we serve people. Right?
Yeah, there are, but like I was telling you when I first started, I had a very clear idea about what my purpose was going to be. And I wanted to serve our community because I felt that mental health, especially 10 years ago, it's gotten better over time.
Oh, I would absolutely say it's gotten better.
Yeah.
We are actually talking about it.
Yes. We're talking about it.
Not a lot, but we're talking about it.
We're posting about it. We're using key words to demonstrate our feelings. We're using words like trauma. We're using words like I feel anxious or depressed. And sometimes those are broad labels, but nonetheless, I'm happy that we're actually using those words in conversation to express the way that we're feeling at any particular time.
Mm-hmm.
It gives us language to identify, stuff that we tend to bury and things that we don't like to talk about. But when you release it, then it gives an opportunity for somebody to come and help you through the healing process.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah.
And you talking about urban trauma, which I don't even think we were even thinking about urban trauma and the day-to-day macro and microaggressions that we have faced for 400 or 500 years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And how that is underneath us all the time.
It is. And this is the piece that to me I was so passionate about. And it took me actually 10 years to really understand how to crystallize that into a definition that would make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And once it made sense to me, then I was hoping that I could put it in like thought to paper and help it make sense to other people, which is that I knew that historically the new nuances around trauma were not new to us, right?
Right.
That we had historical trauma that had impacted us. But what I didn't understand is how to tie it biologically to the genetics around it. I didn't understand how it would impact us one generation after another. I didn't understand how we pass those things down, the dysfunction, the abuse, whether it be sexual abuse or physical abuse, verbal abuse, because, you are who you're with. You are what you learn. And if your parents and their parents before them were victims or abusers, then that's what you're growing up in that environment, and you are creating normalcy around that, so that it doesn't seem weird, it doesn't seem anything abnormal, if that's all you know.
Yes.
And so I wanted to shine a light on the fact that this idea of historical trauma has existed for a very long time, and that urban trauma really has two sides of the same coin, right? The one side is the historical racial trauma that we have experienced as a people, and I say dating back to slavery, but dating back even before then. Right?
Listen, if you go to the African American Museum in DC, have you gone?
Yes, twice.
And let me tell you,
and I only got through I've only been from the bait to the first floor. I've gone twice and haven't gotten above the first floor.
I did the whole thing. I did the whole thing. Let me tell you, when you get down, when you start at the bottom, and you see 400, you see slavery before it even got to the Americas.
Yep.
Girl, that about took the wind out of my sails. Yeah. Like that, I was like, and I think the thing that struck me too was the naming of all the slave ships.
Yep.
And it said 500 slaves and maybe 120 made it. That you will see the roots of urban trauma, the beginnings right there.
Yeah.
It was stunning to me, Maysa. I was freaked out.
Yeah. Well, because we know it in theory, and I think that we can talk about it sometimes, right? Because I think that there are also often people that will be like, oh, come on, we're still talking about slavery. Yeah, we're still talking about slavery because we talk about the things that we haven't been able to process and get over, right? And we're going to keep talking about it until
we haven't even talked about everything.
Right.
Like so much of it is so like, and you hear the narratives, you hear the narratives when you're down on the lower levels, and you hear them talk about the selling of people and the ripping of children out of mothers' arms. And I was like, and then you could see everybody just stand still, like, like a collective, like, it was painful.
Yeah.
It's painful, but it's also, it's a testament to how far we have come, right? Like you're happy and sad at the same time.
And it's interesting because before I actually did the African American Museum in DC, I had gone to the one in Detroit.
Oh.
And the one in Detroit is what I like about it is that in the basement they started with slavery as well, but what they did is that they actually recreated a ship.
Oh.
And
that would have been a lot.
Yeah. I couldn't get out of the basement there either. And I remember sitting there just sobbing because they actually recreate the smell. You can go into a little tiny position where, how all the slaves were packed in.
I couldn't do that.
And it broke me.
I couldn't do it, Maysa.
It broke me. I couldn't even, just the scent, because it really recreates that moment. And then you really understood what our ancestors had to endure, the strength that it took to even survive.
I know
that voyage, that abusive
and there was
voyage.
No therapy when they got to these shores.
No, girl.
Nobody was like, well, how you doing?
Yeah.
How you feel?
How is that trauma that you experience? I tell people all the time, some folks want to call this, I've heard people say like post-traumatic stress disorder or urban post-traumatic stress. And I said, there's no post to this. There is no post. No, we haven't gotten to the point as a community where we can say we're post anything, which is why when we see discrimination and oppression and brutality happen in our community, we get triggered so quickly.
Yeah.
We don't have to be the ones experiencing it. We can feel the anger, we can feel the fear, we can feel the mistrust because it lives inside of us.
Yes.
We haven't been able to get post anything.
Yes.
So we in the trauma.
Yes. Roxane Gay has this book out called Hunger.
I've heard about it, but I haven't gotten it yet.
I have it, and my trainer is reading it now because it talks about, she's a 6 foot tall woman, but she's like 400 pounds or something. And, she was raped as a child. And so she talks about how the trauma of that lives in her body. And I have never heard anybody talk about that kind of thing, how trauma can live in your skin, in you. It takes root
in your DNA.
And then it fed what I believed, why I carry the weight that I carry, the physical weight. Is that trauma? I haven't been able to release that piece. Now, intellectually, yes, and emotionally, yes, but there's some other component there that has not been let go of.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we experience it in different ways. For you, you'll house it in the weight, and then that struggle, right? It'll be a battle for you to, because in your mind, you will envision what you'd like to see, right?
Yeah.
and you can beautifully intellectualize probably anything, Babz, but emotionally, it's a whole different process. It's interesting. Probably like about a couple months ago, I did a TED Talk style thing in New York City. It was called Fearless. It was like for fearless women who will get up and have a open conversation in front of an entire group of people. And I talk in front of people all the time, but so this was like a weekend intensive, and they made you really dig deep into, like a pain point. And I was like, I'm very well composed because, I can put myself together quite well, right? Like as much as I'm, like just in the inside. But they were pushing in there, and they knew what they were doing, right? Up until the point where like they hit my pain point. And it was around shame. And I didn't want to do it anymore. And I said, I don't want to talk. I don't want to do this. I don't want to film it. I'm done. And it, my battle right at that point was the shame that I carry about not being enough. And for me, that's how it lives inside of me. That's my trauma, right? And I carry it with me. It's like a little bag everywhere, like my purse, right? It's like me, my purse, and then my little shame and not enough, that's like on the other side. And it's constant, and it's constantly me having to be like, no, I can do this, no, it doesn't matter, stop it with the negative narrative that you have about what people think of you and how they may not like you and how they may not, and just having to push past that and just stand in my truth
all the time, though, right?
All
like
the time.
I'm always feeling like, my this issue of not being able to release this weight, it drags me back to being a child and vulnerable.
Yes.
And I don't want to be. When I think of smaller, yeah. I think that I'll be a child. I won't be a child, but my body is like, girl, you need all this insulation and cover and protection.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know from what, because I'm a grown woman, but
Right.
still, it's just, So I'm working with my trainer to push past this.
I love it. And I see it. I see your post. I'm like, look at her. I'm just cheering you on the side because I know what it means. For some people, it's just weight loss. And for you, it means something completely different.
Yes.
It's layers deep, right?
Yes.
So that's, and for me that day, standing in front of that crowd, what it meant was breaking through one of the hardest things for me, which is like dealing with my shame publicly.
And this is a new day because, I've been fat for quite some time and not really making the connection between that emotional stuff and the way it lives in my body. This is a new day. Like I've done therapy. Right. And I left therapy because I had a white therapist who didn't know a damn thing about Black women. And she was talking to me in a way, I knew then in my 20s that she was talking to me in a way that was just unsettling to my spirit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. Right. Right. And I just felt like I, like a lot of people, just felt like therapy wasn't for me as a Black person. There's nobody that I didn't even know there were Black therapists. That's number one. In those days. But I came away feeling like, I don't see the point of this.
Well, and I think that what ends up happening is that when you have therapists that are untrained to understand that this is not just about like the psychology, the theory, the book part of mental health, that this is also about the experience. Mm-hmm. It really disconnects. You can't separate the person from the experience, right? The experience is the person. And to sort of say, hey, we're going to check your race and anything that's happened to you that's been discriminatory in any kind of way, that's not allowed in terms of a discussion here. Because actually, if I'm a white therapist, you make me feel uncomfortable talking about that because I haven't dealt with my whiteness around it, right? And so what ends up happening is that there's like what we call a countertransference going on there, right? Where like they're not gonna touch it, because race is just an uncomfortable conversation, for them to have. And so now you end up being the one having to carry that in the session.
Yeah.
You do carry it.
Yes. Yes.
You do carry it. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not here for you.
Yes.
I'm here to heal myself.
Like my dollars is not going back to me.
Right. Right. And I'm not here to educate you either. Right.
Yeah.
Like, because I already have to do that in my community, in the places that I have to live in. We as people of color constantly having to educate folks around our experience. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to then have to go into what we would consider or define a safe space, our healing space, to have to do the same thing.
Yes. And
so, I for me, the purpose, right, of integrated wellness was to create that safety. Mm-hmm. And do we get it right 100% all the time? No, Babz. I wish I can profess perfection. We don't.
But nobody gets it right. Right.
We try. We try. We have a philosophy that we live by. We care and love the people that come in to to get treatment, and we understand that there is a lot of racial trauma that sometimes intertwines with the compromising of mental health. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is what causes the mental health issues, mm-hmm. right? Like, are you anxious because you have an anxiety disorder, or are you anxious because you're afraid of what's going to happen to your Black child every time they go out and leaving your house? Mm-hmm. Is that a fear based on that reality, versus that I need to medicate you because you're anxious all the mm-hmm. time? That's completely different. And we need to understand the difference, because the treatment for either of those is completely different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this is what I like best about integrated wellness, because I have 2 children over there in care. And I was deliberate because I had them in other places for care, and I didn't like the other places for care. And so here you come, and I was like, okay, I could trust this one. I think I could trust this. Because when my son Gregory we adopted him when he was 5. And shortly after that, we found out he was a food hoarder. And Lawrence and I were scared. We didn't know. I had never seen this. I didn't know what to do with this. So we go to a particular little thing across town, and the therapist is in therapy with us, says, well, what is the problem with allowing him to eat in his room? So, honest to God. And so Lawrence and I were like, what?
Versus addressing the food insecurity.
I said,
right.
First of all, the bedroom is for sleeping,
right.
and the dining room is where we eat as a family.
Right.
It was like, well, why can't you just let him? I was like, but he's not really eating in his room, right? He's
hoarding the food.
He's hoarding food.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had to take the dressers out. We had to, it took forever to deal with this.
Yeah.
And I thought they're not they were not helpful. I mean, they didn't make the leap. I mean, Lawrence and I made the leap. We were like, listen, we're going to take the dressers out. We're going to find another system for him. And we're going to do these kinds of things. And we're going to help him. We're going to put food on the table so there's always food on the table. So if he wants something to eat, it'll be on the dining room table all the time, not in his room. But it was that thing that just made me feel like that they don't see my son.
Right. Well, and asking you too, like, what's the culture in your home, right? Because in some homes, it's completely acceptable for people to eat in their room.
Yes.
In my home, and in your home, I'm hearing it's not acceptable. I don't care what it is. You can't even take water into your room,
girl.
Because I'm like, see, that's my trauma. I don't want no roaches in my, so, like no. So the first question is what is your family's relationship around food, and where it should be housed, and how should we talk about this?
We didn't get none of that.
Yeah. And that's the first conversation, right? Because and see, this is why culture is so important, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's just about race. No, you develop, there's a racial culture, there is like community culture, there is school culture, there's a culture in your home. And your kids know what that culture is, right?
Yes.
Yes, they do. And sometimes they're like, we're going to buck against this. We're going to push the limit to see how much mom will allow for me to buck the culture in the home, until you be like, no.
You're not doing it.
Sat down, right? Like, we're not going to do that. So I think that what ends up happening is that if we don't understand that culture, then we're making recommendations and we're missing the target. We're missing the target. And then parents are like, that's not useful. That recommendation actually is not useful because I can't incorporate that recommendation into the environment in my home. Right. And so as therapists, we have to be, savvy enough to ask the right questions so that we can support you in developing the right solution. Right. I think the other mistake that we make is that we make recommendations without, as if we're the experts in your family. And that's an assumption, right? Like, you're the expert in your family, right? We can help guide you. We can partner with you. We can support you in thinking about things that maybe you otherwise would not have thought of. But we really can't determine what are the things that are going to work for you, in a way that can be incorporated and then useful. We can just say, let's try this, let's try that. And sometimes it's not what works for the majority culture. A lot of times it's not, actually.
Let's shift some gears. I sit on the board of Common Ground High School. And I was at a board meeting the other day, and they were talking about the increase, and this is going on across a lot of places, of kids fighting in schools. And no one seems to be able to get to the root of it. And I'm only bringing this up as a mental health issue because there's a lot of angry kids who I don't think their anger is rooted in anything like, I think their anger is rooted in some kind of mental health something. Like something is not happening or something is happening in their lives and they are acting it out in these dangerous spaces, in this dangerous way in spaces. And I'm concerned about that in the sense that, like, what are your thoughts on treating that? Or do you find that a place where mental health professionals ought to be spending some time looking at?
Yeah, I believe that as our society changes and as we are managing more and more content, our kids are exposed to a lot of information that maybe in the past we would have been able to shield them from. So social media has now opened up this entire network, this entire world that, you know, when it wasn't available to them, we can kind of control a little bit what they were exposed to. Maybe not in the neighborhood, maybe not at school, but it was still a pretty contrived environment, right? Now you have sort of global access to almost anything. And I think that the constant feeding of that information subliminally and subconsciously creates, you know, this sort of anxiety in kids, and they don't have the language development yet to be able to verbalize the way that they feel. So they have to enact on these very tumultuous emotions in the rawest form, which is anger. Anger is the rawest form that you can express anything. And that's why you see that there are so many angry people, because it is so difficult for them to actually talk through what it is that they're feeling and to have a conversation around what it is that they need. Because if they were, imagine if the kids were able to say, you know, Mrs. Freeman, I had a really bad day yesterday. You know, my mom yelled at me for no reason. She got mad at me. I got punished and taken my phone away, but I don't feel, you know, and actually talk through that versus, you know, clearing the desk and punching the next kid in the face, which probably had nothing to do with that particular situation, but they're carrying that baggage in, and they don't have the sophistication yet and the emotional language development to talk through what it is that they're actually feeling. And then we don't have the time, or we don't make the time to sit with them to help them develop that language. A lot of times when we're in schools, we're very curriculum focused, but we're not focused on developing emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is just as important as, you know, as academics, as math, as, you know, English. If not more. Right? That's what helps us navigate the world. And if we can't navigate the world, it doesn't matter how book smart you are, because you're not going to be able to socialize with people in an appropriate way. And so, and we see that all the time. And so I think what ends up happening with a lot of angry kids that resort to fighting is just a way to let it out, let that anger, unleash it in one way or another. And then also it's attention seeking, right? See me, hear me. Now I get to tell my story, because now I'm going to sit in your office, me and you together, and you're going to ask me what happened. And I get to tell you how angry I am and complain to you about all the things that have been bothering me. I finally get some one-on-one time.
Wow.
And I did whatever I needed to do to make that happen.
And I see it all the time. I mean, I've seen it with my kids.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've seen it with my kids, and the level of anger that has heightened up, and, you know, and I've seen it, and I've experienced it, and I've been on the other end of it. And I think you're right. Kids don't have any place, you know.
And a lot of times it doesn't, you know, when someone's unleashing anger, it's very easy to take it personally. Like, this has to do with me. But a lot of times it's because they're struggling and they're in conflict about their own feelings, their own insecurities. You know, when I see people that lash out in anger, I immediately think about, you know, what is it that they're struggling with inside? What insecurity are they battling? Why are they projecting this right now? Right? I'm asking myself all those questions, and I'm depersonalizing the fact that they're being attacking towards me. Because if I can do that, then I can see the situation in a very different kind of way, right? And then I see the person for the pain that they're experiencing right at that moment, versus that something's being done unto me. It's very hard to do that, because when somebody's lashing out at you, you have to create a defensive position, you know, because you can't, you know, you have to manage the situation in one way or another. But a lot of times it's rooted in some kind of, you know, painful experience that they are in conflict internally about, and they have no other way to manage all of those feelings, and it boils up and it comes out in anger. And now the first thing, first person, first object, first whatever is gone. we wiping it out, you know? And then for some people, once you get it out, it's actually done. And then for some people, they're just carrying it and perseverating, and it's like a hamster wheel of
can't get off.
Of negativity.
Yes. Talk to me about the VETS program, because that seems to be an inroad into addressing some of these issues with young people having a caring adult in their life.
Yeah. I feel like that's funny. I was a guest lecturer yesterday in a class, and I was telling I was positioning both urban trauma and VETS, and I said, if what I did with urban trauma was identify the problem, what I'm trying to do with VETS is make sure that I have viable solutions available to deal with urban trauma, right? Like, I'm like, I always got to think about, I can't just sit here and talk about the problem all the time, right? And a lot of times I'm preaching to the choir, right? If I'm telling you about urban trauma, you're like, yeah, girl, I know. Who you for a long time. But what we really try to do is kind of figure out, like, okay, what were some of when you take the collective of people who have experienced racial trauma and community violence and have lived in poverty and have experienced, educational disparities in one way or another, what's the common thread in terms of resiliency? Like, what creates resiliency in our community? What moves people from just surviving to thriving, right? Like, what are those key elements? And when I'm doing talks, people are always asking me about that. And I'm like, okay, so what I know about me and a lot of folks that I've talked to and interviewed throughout the process of writing the book is that everyone unequivocally talked about that one person. And sometimes they called it a mentor. Sometimes they called it a teacher. Sometimes they called it a pastor, a community member. But at the end of the day, it was a mentorship relationship. And the idea was that this person provided an unconditional love and appreciation for them. And it's not to say that everyone didn't have a parent. It's not to say that everyone didn't have a comfortable home. Right. Like you don't have to take one away to have the other.
Right.
You can have a loving parent. You can still have a community around you. But that mentor, that relationship with that mentor is completely different and unique, right? And that mentor serves to kind of feed your spirit in one way or another, to identify the areas of growth potential for you, to show you things that maybe you otherwise wouldn't be able to imagine or dream of or think of, and to help you understand that those things can be possibilities for you. And for me, as an inner city kid that had all of the above, right? I had many mentors that were placed in my life that made it very clear that there were things that were greater than me that I can actually achieve, right? Like, of course you can go to college. Of course you can get your PhD. Of course you can go to Yale. Of course you can open a business. Of course you can, and it's like, I could?
Yeah.
Me? But people like me don't do that. I'm like, I'm a, for all intents and purposes, what they used to call me was a hood rat back in the day, right? Like, I mean, let's be real about it, right? Like, I just understood the streets. And so that life seemed so distant. Like, I couldn't achieve that. But when these mentors came in and said that to me, it gave me an option to see the world from a completely different lens. And that's what the VETS do for the kids that they serve, right? It's like, no, let me show you something different. Let's finish this. Let's complete a goal. What's your next goal? I'm never going to leave you. I'm here for you no matter what. And
I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Because my son Khalil has a vet mentor, and let me tell you, it has been grace. Because I can't work with him on those kinds of goals every minute of every, you know what I mean? Like, I cannot, right? There's no capacity for that.
Your mom. It's, I tell
I got to keep the lights on and the water running and groceries in the fridge and
Yeah, and you get tired.
Yes.
You just get tired. You've raised, 4 kids now, so like, and sometimes it's like, you just need a break.
Yeah.
You need a break. And I think that the beauty of it is that the vets, the mentors partner with parents. Like, it's like,
they do.
It's like, tag, you're it. Tag, I'm good.
I love when he
Miss
goes,
Babz,
I got it.
I got it.
Oh, when he says that, I was like,
I got it. I tell parents this all the time, right? You can't, if you have a child that's doing a sport, you cannot be the parent and the coach.
Yeah.
Let the coach do the coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Your role as a parent is to cheer your baby on. That's it. So
you need to go to some games and tell all these parents sitting in these stands. Because you ever go to these games, see these parents thinking they can coach?
2 soccer kids.
Oh,
it's funny. I'm gonna just take this to the side real quick. We were in Mass taking Kalila to a game. She had a competitive soccer game a couple weeks ago, and because we were in Mass, our son Yoshi met us there, and he's been doing this. He's a college level athlete now. And so he comes to see his sister play, and she was so proud to have her brother there, and so he's on the sidelines with me, and he's hearing all the moms, come on, be aggressive, attack the ball, knock him down. And he's like, Mom, for all the years I've been playing soccer, if I were to write down all the comments that moms and parents make on the sidelines, you would think it's some abusive situation. And the parents say the craziest things on the sideline. He's like, maybe I'll have a book that I write. Like that,
you know what? He should. He should. And I'd have him on. We could talk about it.
I know, right?
Because I'm always listen. All my children played sports, all of them, and I did my level best and I coached some of them. In sport, I was their coach, because I played basketball on the high school level and the collegiate level, and so I know the games. I know basketball, I know football, I know all these games. But I was deliberate not to be that coach from the sideline. Like I just wouldn't.
Right.
I just wouldn't, because I've seen so many parents who didn't play not one lick of no kind of sport.
No, and then don't even understand the sport and are telling their child something like
be aggressive.
Exactly.
I was like,
exactly.
I was like, they got a coach over there, but when the season starts, you can sign up to coach too.
Exactly.
So tell them to write that book because it's needed.
Right. If not, fall back. Right. And I think for the mentors in a way, right? It's like that's the beauty of the relationship, that you could be like, hey, let me take care of this, and you just be mom, you just be parent. It's good.
And that's what I want to be. I don't want to be the coach.
Yeah, you don't have to be their friend. You don't have to.
And I damn sure don't want to be their friend. Right. I try to tell them that. I was like, listen. I know we got to open. I know you feel like you want to. I said, but that's why you have good friends to keep your confidence. Because I got to stand in the mom space.
Right.
Except the only time that I tell them, the only time that I've ever said to them, no questions asked, is when Brianna and Gregory were teenagers and they were starting to go to these little parties, and I said, for whatever reason you cannot get home. If for whatever reason, it doesn't matter if you was at a party and there's some alcohol or some drugs and you feel uncomfortable or you indulge and you can't, I said, call me, no questions asked. No, and that meant in my mind, no questions asked at that moment. But tomorrow morning, we all it's WWF. Right. But when I come get you, and I've only had to do that for each of them one time.
Wow.
One time that I've got that call at some god awful hour. Mom, can you come get me?
Well, I would definitely make a recommendation that all parents should have that conversation. There's a no judgment zone that needs to happen, because you would much rather that they call you.
Yes, because if they don't, bad things happen.
And they make bad decisions.
And they make bad decisions. And I don't want them to, so I always had that rule. And I would say that every time they went out. I say it to them, say it to the little friends. I said, listen, if it gets dicey out there, you need call me. Yeah. And I said, and I will explain it to I will come with you to your parents, and I'll stand there in that space with you.
And it doesn't have anything to do, their bad decision making doesn't have anything to do with the type of parent that you've been, right? Like, I think a lot of times parents struggle with, like, did I parent my child right? Am I a good enough mom? Am I a good enough parent? Did I provide the right home for them? Did I do enough? You did. You did. The reality is that they're still developing. They're still trying to make good decisions, and they don't really, their frontal lobes are not fully developed yet. They're still in the process of maturation, and you're not going to see that in full swing until age 25, where you're like, oh wow,
Oh my God, girl,
they're actually making good decisions. Oh wait, they're actually nice. Why, like, I get scared when Yoshi's nice to me. I'm like, what do you want?
Well, no.
And he's like, nothing. I was just calling to see how you're doing. I was like, why? And he's like, Mom, stop.
I was like, listen, you don't know. You don't know. I knew you. I knew you from birth.
Exactly.
I know. Listen. I'm waiting because I'm ready to be empty nest. I'm telling you, Maysa. Ooh, I love raising children, but now I'm ready. I'm like, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm like, oh Lord. And I see people starting second families, at this late game. Listen, I had friends late 40s, 50s having babies, and I'm thinking, there is no way. I don't even know what that. I don't even want to be a grandmother at this point.
I'm telling you, I had my sister-in-law came over a couple weekends ago, and she has I think the baby's like 6 or 7, maybe 8 months. She's gonna kill me. It's like, he didn't know the baby's age. And then she has a 3. My nephew's 3, and they're just, one is crawling, the other one wants to run. You know how they just run in circles for no reason, right? And then he's like, I gotta poop, I gotta do this, and I'm like, I was exhausted, and I'm like, oh my God, and I was like, oh, okay, here's the baby, take your baby back, I'm like,
because I'm not doing this.
I love my nephew, but I'm so happy that we started early, and a lot of people are like, wow, you started a family so early, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, in retrospect,
I wish I would have thought that way.
Yeah.
I was in my late 30s when I started adopting children.
Wow,
girl.
So you're like, look, I'm tired.
I'm like 55 years old. I got a 16-year-old. I don't even listen. Had I thought about that then I would have thought this a little differently. It's like I got friends whose kids are out of college, married, and have kids, and here I am with a young 16-year-old. It's like, Jesus. And a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old. So, girl,
look,
listen.
I'm blessing you right now.
So I gotta wait till they get 25. Girl, I'll be 70.
Right. Right. By the time their frontal lobes mature,
right? They put me in assisted living. I be like, all right, because I don't want to live with none of them.
Right. I'll be eating applesauce by then.
All right, so before we go, Maysa, we got a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me. How do we support loved ones who we believe need some therapy? They've had some trauma. We see behaviors that are cracks in the family. Do you know what I mean? Like, causes the family a great deal of stress. How do we support those loved ones who won't get help?
Yeah. That's a really tough question. And I'll tell you why it's tough. Not because the person who wants to support is not well-meaning, but the first step in this process is acknowledging that something is happening, that something is wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it is tied to relationships. So typically you will see that the entry point for therapy has nothing to do with, like, if you're broke and your finances are like terrible. It has nothing to do with, if you lost your job. It has nothing to do with these other things. The majority of breaking points for people to enter into treatment has to do when the relationship breaks apart. So this is like if you're married or if you're with a partner, you've been with a partner for a really long time. If things are going really sour with your relationship with your children, if you have a lot of family conflict, those are the breaking points, because the emotional connection that we need to the people in our circle and that we love is so deep and intertwined that when those relationships begin to crumble and create discomfort, we feel desperate. And it is only through that desperation that we feel that, okay, now it's time to get help, right? So it's important that I kind of backed it up to that, because look at all the things that can break down in our lives, and that won't be the catalyst event to seeking treatment.
That's big.
Yeah. It'll be like, Babz and I had a terrible fight, and I don't know why she doesn't like me, and I don't, and I love her, and this is, and I need to, and something's wrong with me, and what's wrong with her, and now, and so there's like this conflict, this crisis, this, it's really like what we would call like an existential crisis. Like we don't really know what to do with the fact that relationship is in conflict right now, and so then we try to seek treatment to see our way through it, right? And so, but you have to have enough insight that piece is what's breaking down, right? So if you're the family member that sees that the life around, your loved one is breaking down, but they don't see that, it's very difficult to recommend this as a next step.
Okay. So we can't say to them, I'm not going to talk to you until you get some therapy. Like, don't come to my house until you get some help.
It usually
Can we do that?
It's not going to be the thing that pushes them to go get help. But you know what will? Asking them questions about those things. So you have to be patient with the process, right? So for example, okay, so for the last several months, you've come in and you keep talking about this conflict that you're having at work with this coworker, and you're telling me that you're about to lose your job. So where do you take responsibility around that? But it's not my fault. It's my boss, and it's the person, and they ratted on me, and they're the ones who they try to come for me, and this, and so they'll give you all the stuff which positions them to be in the role of victim.
You sound like my son.
Yeah,
he's good at that.
Because you have to blame, and you can't, when you can't take ownership for your own stuff, you have to blame everyone else for the position that you're in, right? And so in that blame, it relieves you of responsibility.
Oh,
see where we're going with this?
I see it.
It relieves you of that responsibility, because now you are projecting that responsibility onto somebody else, onto anybody else. So what I like to do in those kinds of situations, and what I try to coach other people to do, is start to help them see what role they played. And honestly, if you have a loving, trusting relationship with that person, they probably will hear it faster from you than from anybody else. And then asking those questions will lead them to start thinking about things in a very different kind of way. And don't allow them to keep blaming everything and everyone else. Really challenge them to think about, what was your role? Okay, let's take ownership for what you did. How did you show up? Because here's the thing. We as people have no control in changing the circumstance of someone else. The only thing that we have power to change is us, who we are.
Yes.
I have the power today to make choice around my decision making, around my behavior, about how I interact with you, about whether I choose to love or hate you, whether I choose to gossip about you or not, whether I choose to sabotage our relationship or not. I have choice in all of that. But if I continue to blame someone else, then I'm enacting in dysfunction. And so what I would say is target the dysfunction, because once you can get them to have enough insight, then telling them you need therapy is easy.
See, and this is why 10 years is a wonderful thing.
It is.
So quickly, what do you see for the next 10 years? What do you want?
Man, I've always dreamed about taking this at a global scale and really connecting our people everywhere. I mean, the reality is that we are the global majority in this world, right? Black people, people of African descent, and we have a lot of healing that we need to do. And I want to take this message beyond here. I believe that New Haven is our home. It will always be our home. Is where we're rooted, where we're grounded, is where I was afforded the opportunity, and I will always be grateful for that, to start this. But I think that the message is so much greater, and I'm so excited to see what this global collective is going to look like, and more to come on that.
I love it. Happy anniversary.
Thank you, Babz. Thank
Happy
you for having
anniversary
me.
for 10 wonderful years, and I look forward to see what you do in the next 10 years.
Thank you.
And thank y'all for listening to Lovebabz Love Talk today. I had Dr. Maysa Akbar from Intergrated Wellness Group, and they are celebrating 10 years of service to this community.
On Friday. October
at the,
12th.
At the Swanky Danky Banky Lawn Club.
That's right.
Be there or be square.
That's right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Babz.
Congratulations.
All right.
Mm.